So let us look at passage number 3. Ooh, when I read this for the first time, I was mind blown. Such a nice passage, the word choice and the clarity with which the ideas were communicated using simple language. I really loved it. So the author is talking about himself in the first paragraph and says that there are these things that people experience only in some specific situations, bereavement or shocking unexpected events. I have always felt that same thing, and that is human intellect is unable to make sense of the world. Then he says that it's an uncomfortable mindset, so I looked for solutions. Now, others use two strategies. They deny or ignore, or they fall for an ideology, which makes the world comprehensible. But the author in the next paragraph says, I could not do those things, and therefore I fell into depression. Then he wrote a memoir. While researching, he came across a particular book. That book introduced him to some other guy, and that other guy eventually introduced him to, in a way, that writing essentially made him familiar with certain tenets of Buddhism, right? And that understanding, that clarity, those tenets of Buddhism essentially led to the author somehow finding it better to deal with the world, right? So that's what the theme is. Beautiful theme. Okay, 9. Which of the following, if true, is least likely to weaken the argument of the author that Zen Buddhism helped him understand the world better? So least likely. So let us see which all weaken first. A. The author's depression was caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain and not by his inability to make sense of the world. Ooh, does this weaken? I think yes. Why? Now, according to the passage, the author's inability to make a sense of the world eventually culminated into depression. And then Zen Buddhism helped him come out of it. But if A is true, then the problem was chemical imbalance, which means that it must not have been Zen Buddhism that helped him come out of it, but something else. So this definitely weakens. It tells us that Zen Buddhism could not have helped him understand the world. Okay, B. The author's exposure to Zen Buddhism was brief and he did not practice it long enough to fully understand its teachings. Okay, so if you do not understand something fully, can a credit be given to that thing? Yes. So, or no. So I'd say no. If you do not fully understand, you cannot give full credit to that thing. So this also weakens. But if I compare A and B, I'd say A definitely weakens it more, and therefore A is ruled out. Okay, then let's look at C. The author's first book, The Scent of Dried Roses, was not well received by critics and readers. Absolutely irrelevant. It will have no bearing on the fact mentioned in the question. Let's have a look at D. The author's understanding of Zen Buddhism is based solely on the teachings of Alan Watts and not on the traditional texts or practices. Definitely weakens. So what D says is that the author did not even read Zen Buddhism. He merely went on to read Alan Watts' take on it. Okay, so if it is true, then the credit should go to Alan Watts' writing and not to Zen Buddhism. See, after all, when you read a particular author, you're basically reading that author's interpretation of something, right? For instance, I remember this from a book where we had this another very popular religious guru, controversial, called Osho. So he one fine day said that whenever I give a talk, I say what I have to say. I use the scriptures scriptures as hooks or hangers for me to hang whatever I have to say. So it's just basically the author's perspective, author's take, and it can even be very far away from the teachings of the book that he or she preaches, right? And that is why D also weakens. So as you can see, A, B, and D weaken. C does not weaken. So obviously that becomes the least likely to weaken. And that is why for this particular question, we should mark C as our answer, right? Let's go ahead and look at our next question. Question number 10, which of the following best captures the main argument of the author most appropriately? So A, Mm, now, that life is worthless. Oh, is the author negative about Zen Buddhism? No. Is he negative about the learnings that he had from it? So no, and therefore A can be eliminated. How about B? Same as A, that life has no purpose. That's negative. Whereas the author's takeaway from Zen Buddhism was not negative, was not that pessimistic. Okay. How about C? Feelings of discomfort, confusion before in Zen Buddhism that taught him to make life purposeful. That in fact contradicts what the passage says. Ah, that is not mentioned in the passage. Oh, and whatever is mentioned is essentially contradictory. So this can also be eliminated. And that leads to D as our best answer choice. It captures everything rather thoroughly. So let's pick it up. Next one. Inference is correct. So thankfully, a straightforward inference based question. So let's see. The author has always been extremely sensitive. Can't say. Was he sensitive? We don't know. Was he extremely sensitive? We don't know. Okay, the author had learnt about Zen Buddhism to fight his depression. Not mentioned anywhere. He was writing a book, so he researched. Research led to one book. That book led to another author and his philosophy. So he definitely did not pick up Zen Buddhism to fight his depression. So this can be termed not true. Let's look at C. The author had a preconceived notion about what a philosopher should look like before reading Alan Watts. Yeah, this can be inferred. The author has in fact used for Alan Watts, he has said that he sounded like an unlikely philosopher. So you can say that only when you have some idea about how a philosopher should be. So this is true. D, the author fell into an acute depression at the age of 27 and did not recover. Now, this part is true, but did not recover. That's not true. And that is why, since when we look for inference, we're looking for something that is true, the best answer for us is option C. So let's go ahead and choose that as our answer. With that, let's move into the last question from this passage. Does not resemble the following argument. And here is the argument. Trying to see all of life is like trying to explore a vast cave with a box of matches. So the basic structure here is that doing X is impossible because you have something grossly inadequate. Doing X is impossible because you have something that is grossly inadequate. Now, A, C, and D talk about scenarios where, well, the task is impossible because you have inadequate tools. B, on the other hand, says advanced technology, which means that the tools are likely to be adequate. So it does not resemble that argument. And that is why it should be our answer.